Hello everybody, welcome back. Jonathan and I back with another video. Today we're going to be discussing the Castile verdict, which as you know came out on Friday. Just kind of giving our thoughts on it, a little debate whether we feel the verdict was justified or not. First we'd like to share with you a quick video of his mother's reaction after the verdict.
Fighting for justice just as well as I am. I am so disappointed in the state of Minnesota. My son loved this state. He had one tattoo on his body, and it was of the Twin Cities, the state of Minnesota with TC on it. My son loved this city, and this city killed my son.
So
then,
what is your viewpoint on the verdict?
my thought on it is this. Here's what we know. We know that an innocent man was pulled over because of a supposed taillight malfunction, and a few minutes later he was gunned down in front of his daughter. That's it. Those are the facts. That's what we know for sure. And we also know for sure that if the person who pulled him over, the person who gunned him down, wasn't an agent of the government, that person would be in prison right now. There's accountability that needs to happen. And in this country, you're not supposed to, you can't, innocent people don't get gunned down and then nobody's held accountable for it. There has to be some level of accountability. And as much as I don't believe there was malice in that officer's heart. I don't think he's a racist. I don't think his intention was to do this terrible thing. He still needs to be held accountable for it. And I believe he should be in prison.
So my view on this is I do not think he should have been held accountable. Despite the fact that this situation should have never happened because people shouldn't be getting pulled over for broken taillights. I also believe that he followed all the protocols he's supposed to and was doing his job despite how dumb his job is. And the job shouldn't exist for agents of the government. He shouldn't be pulling people over for a broken taillight. That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But he did everything that he is allowed to do. He pulled someone over for a broken taillight, which is part of his job description. And then he went up and he said the person tried to pull a gun. So in response, the officer defended himself by shooting him, which none of that, despite how terrible it is and how unjustified and unfair it is, did not break any of the rules that he was given as a police officer. So I do not think he should have been held accountable.
Well, first is the officer never would have thought he was pulling a gun if Mr. Castile hadn't informed the officer that he had a weapon. Mr. Castile was respectful, was referring to him as sir, and informed him as per his responsibility as a concealed carry weapon holder that he had a weapon in the car. None of that should lead an officer to think that none of that should lead a reasonable person to think this guy's going to try and kill me. He's going to go for his gun and he's going to try and kill me. I believe that the officer panicked. Clearly he overreacted. Mr. Castile is not a criminal. This is not a person with a criminal record. This is not a person whose background would indicate anything that would cause anybody a reason to think that this was an act that he was going to attempt to kill a police officer. He's got his daughter in the car. He's got his fiance in the car. I believe this officer overreacted. I believe he panicked, whether he was poorly trained or just wasn't fit to wear the uniform of a police officer. An innocent man is dead. That's it. Somebody has to be held accountable. And yeah, you're 100% right. These two people never should have met. Police shouldn't be pulling people over because of broken taillights. But let's be honest here. He didn't pull him over because he had a broken taillight. He pulled him over because we're fighting an illegal war, in my opinion, on drugs, because we want to keep people from doing things and making decisions with their own bodies. We're putting police in these terrible situations where they have to constantly be interacting with the public. And these are the kinds of things that are going to happen. I think we have to take a look at the law and make a determination as to whether or not we want to keep trying to control people's behavior in this way, and whether or not the price that we just paid through the loss of Mr. Castile's life is worth it. So I think that's a question that we need to ask. But at the end of the day, you don't get to kill innocent people. And the jury should have found him guilty. And the reason the jury should have found him guilty is because that's where you start taking a stand. That's where you start pushing back against government involvement in our lives. And you say, you don't get to do this, you're going to be held accountable.
When you're determining a verdict, you need to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, this person did a crime. I believe that it is probably more likely that he overreacted or shot the man unnecessarily or panicked. But because we don't know for sure, and there is that, rather let one Rather let 1,000 criminals get away than have one innocent man falsely arrested. You can't hope. You can't be. I'm 90% sure that he committed this crime and he deserves to be. You can't take that risk because you're risking putting an innocent man in prison for the death of an innocent man. And there can't always be there isn't always someone to blame for something. Like if someone gets murdered and the murderer gets away, yeah, someone needs to be held accountable, but there's no one to hold accountable here.
There is someone to hold accountable. It's the officer. We know this isn't a murder.
Yeah, but if
wait a minute, this isn't a murderer who got away. We know who killed Mr. Castile. We know that an innocent man is dead, and we know who killed him. This isn't a circumstance where somebody got away with a crime. An innocent man. Look, if I am driving down the road and I'm speeding or I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing behind the wheel of my car, and an accident occurs and somebody dies, I can be held accountable for that as this was a negligent act on the part of the officer. And whether the officer was committed this negligent act through the course of his duty or not, he did end up killing an innocent man, and he needs to be held accountable for that.
That's making the assumption that the man was innocent and didn't try. If he did indeed try to pull a gun, which is what the officer claims, then he's no longer an innocent man because he tried to kill an officer. So therefore it was justified. What I'm saying is we don't know if the man was killed innocent. If he's killed innocent, well then yes, obviously the officer needs to be arrested for his crime. But he may not be innocent. That's the uncertainty that makes me not want to put him behind bars.
I understand your point about innocence. And maybe Mr. Castile wasn't innocent because maybe he did attempt to, but we don't know that. And the reason we don't know that is because Mr. Castile's dead. That's what we know. And so if you take the information that we know that Mr. Castile's dead and we know who killed him. And there's no reason to think that he was going to attempt to kill this officer. Was the gun even out? No.
Well, yeah, but again, you're making the assumption. You're putting a good chance in the fact that the officer should be arrested. And again, I think that the officer did it unjustified. I think there's a good chance, but I'm not willing to be, yes, we need to put this man behind bars because I'm 90% sure that he committed the crime. In this case, again, we shouldn't have to deal with unfair odds like this. We shouldn't have to be like, there's an innocent man dead, most likely innocent man got gunned down by an agent of the government because his taillight was broken, is basically what happened. But we still shouldn't, how I view it, it's unfair just because I can't put this man behind bars because I don't know if the officer is unjustified, but this whole situation is dumb because it shouldn't have happened.
Well, the whole situation is unjustified, and the jury needed to find this police officer guilty to send a message that this is unjustifiable behavior, and we need to start pushing back against it. I want police to think about whether or not they want to pull a person over. I want them to think about the long-term consequences of the action. When an innocent man ends up dead, when somebody's dead because their taillight was out, I want to be able to go back and say, what was the reason that we interacted in the first place? Why did these two people talk to each other? We're not going to get there unless we start holding police responsible for these shootings. I know it's going to be an unpopular opinion. I know people are going to say the police are out there but he was not protecting and serving. He was trying to enforce a government. At the end of the day, we know we didn't pull him over because of the broken taillight, right? Mm-hmm. We know what he was pulling him over for. He was pulling him over because, hey, his taillight's out. This is a great excuse for me to stop this person, interact with a free citizen of the United States, and potentially arrest somebody for committing a crime of what? Possessing a plant. I mean, that's what this is all about. This is
possession of a plant.
Possession of a plant.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, Mr. Castile's dead because of that. And so the jury sitting there, we have to start thinking about that in terms of, no, you aren't allowed to do that in the United States of America. In a free country, you're not allowed to just stop a person for an arbitrary reason with obviously a greater agenda, demand their identification, and then a few minutes later this person is dead. No, that's absolutely unacceptable.
But if you do that, if I were in the jury, I would say the man was guilty. I would be for that. I would also feel some sort of guilt because he's an agent of the government, but the officer doesn't know really what's going on. He's like, I'm supposed to pull over people for broken taillights. That's my job. And if someone tries to attack me, I have the right to shoot him. That was his thought process. That's what he thinks, and he's just working as an agent of the government. So if he gets arrested, he'll be like, what did I get arrested for? I did my job. He'll claim I got attacked. He tried to pull a gun on me, and I shot him. I did my job. I broke no rules. So why am I being held accountable? For him and for a large portion of America, that's unfair and unjustified.
It would be potentially unfair to him. I understand that, but what the way you started that sentence sums it all up. His thought process and holding the government accountable, holding the agents of the government accountable for these kinds of things, and sending a message back that we are not going to tolerate this kind of interference in our day-to-day lives is the way you start changing that thought process. And as unfortunate as it is, I think that that he needed to be held accountable for it. And my heart goes out to the Castile family. My heart goes out to the Yanez family. This is a terrible tragedy. But a man is dead, and somebody needed to be held accountable. And I think that sums it up for me.
I mostly agree with that. I don't think it's complicated, but I think someone should be held accountable, but I don't think we can hold anyone accountable. But in the end, I still think he should be. I still believe that he should be held guilty, but I relate more. It's weird.
I think you understand why the jury returned the verdict of not guilty from the letter of a law perspective.
Yeah, I'm not mad. I wouldn't be mad at either side.
At either way, I understand. Well, thank you all for taking a little time to watch our video. Again, please subscribe to our page. We're going to keep trying to put out decent content for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please comment in the section below. Subscribe to our page, and we'll see you next time.